thanks to Rick and Phil for leading off the questions. So Tucker, maybe we can pull up Rick's. So for those watching, feel free to comment or ask any questions. Several, I'm sure, are part of the Nour fan club, as am I and Phil and Rick. Rick asks, thank you, Nour. Can't wait to read your new book. I've read both Curve Benders and Co-Create. Speaking of AI and ML, what role do you believe these technologies should play in business relationships?
Rick, good to see you. Thanks for the kind question. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been a huge advocate of technology and the business impact of technology for as long as I can remember. Rick, what AI and ML cannot do is replace you and I meeting in person and shaking hands and looking each other in the eye. And you've heard me say, and Randy, again, that you live this motto. I've always believed there's a very simple 4-step process of like me, know me, trust me, pay me. It works in that sequence. And if you don't create opportunities. If Johnny Carson used to say there's a certain likability factor for all of us. If you don't allow people to get to know you, the real you, and don't give them a chance to, likewise, get to know them, invest in getting to know them, you should have no expectations of the awareness and the engagement and certainly the payday that is the capitalizing part of that. So AI and ML can certainly create awareness. I think it can create helping buyers, particularly if we're talking about buyers, in their next step in their journey. But you need to be able to figure out when's the right time to infuse a real human being. And that person better be intelligent enough that I don't have to repeat myself. They got to add value. It can't be just let me share information. I can get that from a lot of other places. You really do need to go back to how do we nurture real, authentic relationships so we demonstrate a vested interest in their success, and then they're much more likely to believe us and believe in us and want to work with us. So I love AI and ML in reducing some of the labor intensity. I love AI and ML in discerning who are the right profiles for us to kind of interact with. I love AI and ML recommending kind of next steps and the right content in their, for that buyer's consumption in their buying journey. It does not replace the human interaction. And that interaction needs to be value-based and it needs to be authentic.
Yeah, I think one of the best tech sales examples is somebody says, I have a relationship, but they had a relationship with whatever executives or people they're selling to or customers because they had that business card that said the Cisco, the IBM, the EMC, the NetApp, the whoever. Then all of a sudden they go to some other smaller company. Geez, Randy, they're not seeing me. I know them. I knew them. We're really you have a relationship. Yes. Well, tell me about their relationship. It was not a relationship at all. And I think that's usually the true test. And then just to give credit, the know me, like me, trust me, the original of that was Walter Brown, rest in peace, who's early sales consultant at EMC, who Ken Doherty, Brian Bell, myself, several others are totally disciples of as well. But I think that really just totally rings true. And then I think the umbrella around the relationship side is, okay, so when things are tough, are you there for the customer? If it's the middle of the night, are you there? Are you helping? Can they count on you? And that's probably the best thing you can do to build relationships.
Unequivocally, yes. I'm going to go one step further. If you even go earlier in the process, Randy, I've heard this from you of reference checking of a sales rep, of any employee. And let's say you're hiring them in Atlanta, where I live. I love the fact that you ask them, well, who do you know? Like who's been a past client or who would vouch for you or who do you have a relationship with? And if they struggle in answering that, or if you talk to that person, they're like, yeah, that person sold me something transactionally years ago. I haven't talked to them since. It should highlight for you that this person really isn't or isn't very relationship centric. Because if you believe in this notion that beyond your educational foundation, beyond your professional pedigree, your portfolio of relationships is your single biggest asset, you would nurture that. And you would nurture that on a daily basis. And those who don't will do it at their own peril. Because people change jobs, they change industries, they move. And if your outlook or if your contacts are as outdated as most people's are, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, totally. For our recruiting business, top talent recruiting, that's one of our advantages that we'll say, early in the process, not at the back end, we'll figure out, how do we connect the dots? And as well as that person may know somebody, I'm comfortable, I know them just as well, that they're going to give me the straight scoop. And it's never an in between. It's either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I'm always amazed, especially by first and second line, sales folks, that if you say, okay, whatever, Delta, so to Delta, really, okay, so Rahul Samant, who's I think so the CIO, okay, do you know him or his people? Well, let me I'll just ask him. Well, I don't know. Okay, well, so you don't know Delta, or just like crazy. Like, okay, I've never lived in Atlanta, but at least there's a couple, accounts that I know you're supposedly selling to. How is it that you've not nurtured it? So anyway,
one other quick point on that. If you notice, you didn't ask them about the product they sold, right? You asked about the relationship, and I keep reiterating to people, relationships are not between logos or buildings. They're always between individuals. And if I call so-and-so and ask them, tell me about Randy Seidel, right? What are they going to say? And if you don't know, that's a blind spot. So how proactively are you nurturing and sustaining your most valuable asset, which is your relationships?
Yeah, totally. And it gets lost. We're going back and forth here, but especially I think the younger generation, and especially with Zoom and everything. Well, you can't build relationships. Yes, you can, right? So, maybe that's a good question for you. So, if you can't do face to face, what would be some suggestions of how people can build relationships, especially? I'll say like a net new, kind of cold calling situation, right?
Sure. There's a reason the first chapter is the top 10 reasons why most networking doesn't work. And I've also written in LinkedIn about how frighteningly and woefully underprepared some people are when it comes to relationships. So a quick answer is, for your audience, think about every relationship almost as a theater act. There's a before, during, and after. The level of prep you do before every interaction. I don't care if it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes before that Zoom meeting. Really try to understand, really try to do your due diligence on I start macro to micro, industry, company, this individual, their background, they're on LinkedIn, where they come from, if they've ever been a guest somewhere, if they've been quoted in an article. Do your due diligence on the person. And what happens is, sociologists call this being ambient aware. The more knowledgeable you become about that person, the more proactively you can nurture, you can manage that relationship. So if I have a Zoom meeting with a prospect, I am not just showing up. And I swear to you, it's amazing how many people do this. What do you do? Or they don't know half I might be old school posts. They don't know half the stuff that they should know before that call. So we got to do a better job on the prep. You got to be in the moment. I've always believed, convey your credibility to the questions you ask, not necessarily the solutions you provide. This isn't about you. It's about how they would be better off because of you. You cannot learn if you're talking. So I love, Zoom meetings where I'm asking the questions and I'm gaining a lot of insights, but it also can't come across as an inquisition. So You need to have I don't like necessarily elevator pitches, but you need to have similarly succinct value proposition. You need to have succinct war stories that are relevant that you can share. You need to have a next step of here's not how to sell them, but how to kind of help them in their journey. And you've heard me say, it's a lot easier to give a hand than have your hand out. So if you help them buy, if you help them solve that problem, if you help them, even if you're not the solution, help them, connect them to someone else who can help them. That's how you demonstrate. You cannot just say this stuff. You got to demonstrate that you have a vested interest in their success. And then the after is the follow through, which is a process, not a transactional follow-up. You do that and you can make virtual interactions certainly much more impactful than I think many are today.
Absolutely. So Rick, thanks for the question. A lot of good follow-ups there. So from Phil Walton, hey Phil, we have Dave Nour is absolutely the best. Violent agreement. How do relationships in the building of those relationships change or need to be modified in different geographies around the world. And we don't care about Iran, so maybe think about some other geographies.
Phil, thank you for the kind comment. That's very nice of you to say. Unequivocally, geographies come into play. I mean, as close to home as Northeast and the Southeast, as they do Midwest, and then you start to go abroad. And for the audience, if you don't know this, I'm originally from Iran. I wrote in the book, I didn't get it then, but I certainly get it now, that 5 or 6 years old, walking through the bazaars of Iran with my dad, he didn't just have a list of things mom wanted or, the things he needed around the house. Dad literally made a relationship list. And we went around and he visited with, over a cup of tea or, sitting in their shops or going to the office and visiting them, people that he wanted to make sure we visited with, whether it was a plumber or a politician. So I learned at a very young age that you have to be intentional about that. I've lived abroad. I've worked abroad. The rest of the world, and Randy, if your audience doesn't hear anything else, this would be, I think, really useful. The rest of the world builds relationships first from which they do business. Regrettably, many of us as Americans, or certainly Westerners, are so hell-bent on that deal or that project or that initiative or that transaction that if and only if that goes well, then we'll think about asking about their spouses or significant others and their kids and where they go on vacation and their holiday plans. So you got to think about relationships as the arrowhead and lead with that, not the feathers at the tail end of the arrow. So Phil, you and I have seen this where we go into situations and the people who don't look like us, sound like us, or come from our backgrounds are borderline offended because we tend to jump right into the transaction without demonstrating authentically any empathy for them, for what they've gone through, for what they are going through. And by the way, this is as relevant inside an organization as it is external to it. One of the misperceptions about relationships that is purely external. Customers, vendors, investors, board members, partners, channel partners, everybody outside. I would submit your intra-company relationships are as critical. So if you have an office in anywhere near Ukraine these days, you would have to be thick as a brick to jump right into the transactional and not really think about, not really focus on the transformational and really bring how they're doing, what they're doing, what's happening with them into the mix. So those are just a couple ideas on really thinking about how to proactively nurture those relationships that are outside of those environments.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. And I'm just wondering, from a younger generational thing, you always have to watch what we say. But if you think about, okay, they can do dating online, they can do all this texting and everything else. Just the gift of gab and just talking, and you call it a rap maybe, but kind of in the social setting, that's definitely decreased compared to when we were in our 20s or 30s. So I wonder how much of that is rubbing off into the work environment where it's a hard, awkward thing where it should just come naturally.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to I posted. So we've been interviewing, you'd love this. We've been interviewing SDRs and BDRs to add to our team. And Randy, I've narrowed 50 down to about 25, interviewed about 25. And I wrote a LinkedIn post of how, again, woefully underprepared they were in how they showed up and their ability to have an intelligent conversation and engage and influence and pretend like you care, pretend that you've done your homework and you want to be there. And it is frightening if we don't elevate our coaching, our mentoring, our modeling of these relationship behaviors. It's not just for the next generation. Collectively, when we see it, I think it's gonna bite us in a big way.
Yeah, crazy. Out of curiosity, for your SDRs, do they have to live in Atlanta?
They do not. We're 100% again remote as a company, and I'm looking, and I've reverted to finding the attitude, the things that are unteachable, right? The work ethic, the scrappiness, the hustle. I can teach them our business, but it's very difficult to teach someone to get up and be self kind of driven and inspired to go do great things. But I can teach them our business and everything else that we do.
Oh, great. I actually talked to a young woman 2 days ago who recently graduated from Vanderbilt, lacrosse player. I don't remember Bob Singh saying from Sun, his daughter Kelly's great career. I'm kind of mentoring with her, something that she vouches for. So I will definitely refer her over to you.
That would be great. Welcome that.
Definitely impressed me. So Rick and Phil, thanks for the questions. So any others watching along or listening along, feel free to make any comments or ask any questions. Again, we've got David Nour, who's CEO of the Nour Group, and just a wealth of knowledge on a whole bunch of topics. So talking about relationships in the workplace, we're talking before, and McKinsey and Gallup have some interesting data about how relationships in the workplace can actually help with retention.
Yeah, it's great to see after 20 years of carrying this flag, the more marquee and credible sources talk more about this topic. McKinsey put out a fabulous research that showed talent retention. So if you want to retain your best talent, the not just more, but the deeper relationships they build will actually keep them from taking calls from recruiters and looking into, potentially leaving the company for other opportunities, because they feel that sense of connection to hopefully their job, but certainly others. And they make friends at work, and they don't want to let those friends down. They don't want to let those friends go. Similarly, Gallup in their workplace state of the global workplace mentioned happiness. So employees who are happy, employees that are, it reduces the burnout that we all know about and we've certainly seen, but it also creates this endearing connection to the organization, because I feel like they're more than just colleagues, they're friends, and they've got my back. And they use a lot of layman's terms that I think we can all relate to. But you know what? If I'm out sick or if I need to go take care of loved ones, I know my team's got that covered. So all of these point to the breadth and some depth of the relationships that people build as huge enablers of attracting and retaining exceptional talent.
Yeah, it's amazing. Again, you would think it's just common sense, but yeah, and it's also crazy, right? When we were growing up, if you left the company, before 5 years or something wrong with you, now everybody can, jump year to year, and that's perfectly acceptable.
U.S. labor statistics: 14 jobs by the time someone is 34 years old.
Wow, you used to be maybe 14 jobs in the same company, but
right. And you're right. We would frown on that. The other thing that I'm talking to a lot of executives right now, increasingly the side hustles are picking up, right? Some leaders have the mindset of, well, we're going to write into their employment contract that they're not allowed to do a side hustle. I'm not sure that's the right approach. What I'm asking you is, what if that side hustle was inside your company? So right. Susan, who happens to be one of your sales reps, happens to be a fantastic chef, right? And she loves cooking and she does catering on the side. Why can't she cater the next sales meeting, right? So are there opportunities, again, without conflict of interest where it makes sense, but it goes back to really embracing the whole employee and really understanding what makes them tick, what makes them excited about kind of what they're doing. How do we really help them bring more of themselves into the work environment? The other stat that I got to tell you that's going to make you cringe about this whole going back to the office, and it comes in with this idea of hybrid relationships. Again, another Gallup survey, the number one reason those under 30 years of age do not want to go back into an office during the pandemic, Randy, you're going to cringe. They got a dog. and they don't want to leave that dog home alone. Now, you and I, or old school thinking could be, well, you know what? Go put him in a doggy daycare. But they feel a sense of responsibility to this pet that was with them during, some difficult times. And in 2023, it would be short-sighted for leaders not to understand that and figure out that person is at their best when they're content, when they're happy, when they're going to do their best work, including prospecting, including engaging customers. So how do we work in this work from everywhere, WFX world, than we have in the past of you got to be in the office from sunrise to sunset every day?
Yeah, I don't know if I would be allowed to post it. I might be old school, but I might call it WTF. That's just crazy.